All right, welcome to another episode of Warrior versus Zombie. And today I've got another amazing guest, another amazing warrior. We'll introduce her in a second. But first, I want to remind those that have been part of our audience before, or maybe if you're just joining us for the first time, about what Warrior versus Zombie is all about. So, warriors realize, and we all know, that success is a journey, it's not a destination. As warriors, we all have a history of ups and downs, wins and losses that are all part of making us who we are up to this point, and they provide a foundation for a path forward. We all battle our zombies, both our inner zombie and those in our world. And boy, we've had a lot of those over the last year. In each episode, I interview warriors who are aspiring leaders from all walks of life: entrepreneurs, artists, health practitioners, business owners, you name it, authors from everybody, really any inspired leader that has a story to tell. These warriors always have a cause, they have unique value that they bring to the table, and a vision that goes generations into the future, and today's guest is no exception. Cheryl Ginnings is an amazing warrior. She's an international best-selling author, a teacher, a radio host, and an international speaker. As a warrior, she lives her philosophy to burn out, not rust out. In addition to being a radio host, she guests on many podcasts, writes articles on many sites like Pray.com and Quora Expert. She's written 2 solo books and parts of 16 other books with other authors. So she's definitely a team player. She developed a course for NYU Continuing Education on caring for our parents. She was featured on 2 magazine covers. She been a radio host on a weekly, has a live show interviewing for others, over 133 other shows. She was a top realtor for many years, so funding her journey at that point. She's a certified coach, a copywriter, teaches Bible classes, has led women's retreats, formed a network for ministers' wives, spoken on several college campuses, and produced a video used by 2 universities and broadcast on TV. So, wow, Cheryl, you must be like 20 to have all this energy to do all this stuff. But welcome to Warrior versus Zombie. And how are you doing today? And what's going on in your world? Where are you at? And what's going on in your world?
Well, David, it's great to be a guest on your program, and I appreciate you having me here. Um, I am in Lawton, Oklahoma, and for those who have been in the Army, you may have been here at one time or another because it's the home of artillery training for the Army. I'm doing great. I am one of those late bloomers. Started out helping my husband through graduate school and thinking, oh boy, we haven't had a baby yet. So, my big dream was to have children and raise those children. Well, the first one had cerebral palsy, so I took all of my energy in learning to care for him, and then we had 2 girls that are wonderful. And through the years, it was consuming to do that. So I went back and finished my degree later after my youngest was in 3rd grade. And that kind of turned my life around. And since then, it was earning some of the degrees the things that I was uh, learning in going back to Sam Houston State University, and that is in Huntsville, Texas. But my husband's a minister, so we've moved different times. And we were in Fort Worth for a while, and then we have been here in Oklahoma for 25 years. Hard to believe.
Well, so in Oklahoma, so you're in Lawton, Oklahoma. Um, what's the world like there? One of the things over the last now 33 episodes is I found a lot of the warriors have either not they've lived in different parts of the country, different environments, and we all kind of assume everybody's living through the same exact thing. And one of the things that I learned very early on in talking to people was, the statement that we're all in the same boat is not true. We're all in the same ocean, but we all have our own boats or own ways of navigating that often create a much different experience in what we're dealing with today. What's the world like other than being a military town and your world today? What is that kind of look like to you?
Well, we have lived here, quite a while. So I haven't been able to tell a lot of difference except when the pandemic first started. I had several friends who ended up with it immediately. And two of those eight that got it right off the bat died. And one of them was in the hospital 88 days before she passed away. And it was one of those people you just can't imagine. She was not sick and she was such an energetic person, and it was a surprise. I think a lot of it is the learning process of dealing with COVID that really took some of the lives to begin with. But last year was tougher. We lost several friends across the country, and not all were COVID, but it changed the way everybody deals with each other. And I've learned to stay in more, but I'm always busy. It doesn't matter where I am. I'm going to be doing something that, writing or visiting with somebody, doing whatever it is that I can do from home. But anyway, you wear masks around here and you just limit how much you're getting out, or we did. And then it was like everybody's out. And now I had a lot of, because so close to this has been getting a high risk, but also Oklahoma is in the higher risk.
Hmm. Well, that's kind of interesting. I already we started to get a little bit of a glimpse of your story, and I want to make sure I have proper time to kind of focus on that. So we're going to take a quick break. We're going to hear a little of Ricky Jean Wright, a little more of Ricky Jean Wright, and it's not to get in there for those in the audio audience as they're listening to this podcast. And then we'll come back with more from Cheryl Ginnings, and we'll talk about her story and how she got from the beginning to where she is today. And one of the things I've already picked up in conversation with her prior to today, as well as just even briefly in this introduction to her, is that she is a warrior and she's focused forward. So a lot of the times when we talk about the journey, as I hear from warriors, they kind of gloss over things. But Cheryl, let's talk a little bit about your challenge, the things that you've worked through in your journey to get to where you are today. I want to hear a little bit about that when we come back. So with that, let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Cheryl Ginnings and Warrior versus Zombie. All right, we're back. And Cheryl, that was a good check-in. I liked hearing about things in Lawton, Oklahoma, and sorry to hear about some of you close. We've all, I think, experienced through this last year the loss of some people, as well as the challenges of fear and how to deal with that and how to navigate this new world. And that actually has been an underlying check-in theme throughout the last 33 episodes of this podcast because we're all going through it. But let's talk a little bit about how you started on your journey. You mentioned that you're a pastor's wife. You've mentioned that you've moved around a little bit. You're now kind of planted in Lawton, Oklahoma. But before we get to where you are today and forward, tell us a little bit about how you got here.
Well, when we had our first child, it never entered our minds that he wouldn't just be healthy. Everybody said, "What do you want, boy or girl?" And you just assumed everything would be all right. But with the problems that we experienced and the inadequate care, never really knowing what we were dealing with for 14 months, and a baby that cried all the time, couldn't hold his head up, and no support, and doctors saying, "Well, we didn't study that in school." I had to find the information on my own. And then when I found in an old book from the library that there was a school, we lived in Tennessee at the time. The school was in Wichita, Kansas. So when we went on vacation, that's where we went to check it out. And in spite of a doctor saying he was going to keep our son from ever going to school there because he didn't see any hope for him, he looked in his eyes about 5 seconds and said, "No hope, put him away, forget you had him, just go have another baby." Well, that wasn't okay with me. And we were in the process of moving. And thankfully, the other people that were on the panel to decide if we could go let us attend school, because it was to teach us what to do as much as helping him. But we were having to drive 90 miles one way 3 times a week with a baby that cried all the time, and before car seats, we just had foam in the back to keep him so he could roll around. It was a tough journey, but we never gave up. We never talked about what we were going through. It was just the way it was. And I have learned by keeping up with other families that my journey is not a lot different than others, except that I was pre-knowledge. And I had to learn everything on my own. And the schools even tried to keep us out, didn't want to provide bus transportation and different things that we had to kind of work on. But now I am on sites where I'm hearing mothers of special needs children ask the very same questions that I ask. And my dream is that as long as I've got breath in me, to be able to give support to people who are going through these tough times, help point them to where they can find resources. You're going to have a hard journey, but it's up to you to find the information you need for your child. And I try to give them 5 things to try to really focus on what their role is, because families who have special needs children will end in divorce over 90%. And that's not acceptable. I mean, we've just got to help them. And most of it goes back to what they made me study more of at Sam Houston. I was majoring in communication. And they said, "We want you to do this video about why communication breaks down in these families." Well, everything in my life since then has gone back to that. And because of my son, that's my big why, is to help other people manage what they're dealing with.
Wow. Well, I want to come back to that a little bit, because before we land the plane for this segment and go on to talking about what you're doing today, first of all, I can hear very clearly in your voice, you even said it, what your dream is, the impact you're wanting to have on the world today and going forward. And it's interesting. The challenges that you experienced, again, were of similar vintage, or the things have evolved and have gotten better. But in that same vein, the challenges, the transition, the what you have to deal with emotionally, are very much the same. I find it interesting, even in thinking about the challenges that our children have, even if they're not special needs today, having just gone through the pandemic,
Right.
some of the unique things that they're experiencing. We even saw in the Olympics, we see examples of our young people dealing with anxiety, stress, things that maybe the doctors, we inadvertently create because we're trying to keep them safe. One of the things, again, listening to you as a warrior and then thinking about that is it's not without challenge, no matter what your walk is. And so hearing the lack of support, and that could have
Yes.
been an excuse. I mean, it could have been an easy thing, not easy thing, but just the course of least resistance may have been just to walk away from it. But instead, you said, "Nope, not going to do that. We're going to step up. I'm going to make a difference in my son's life, and continue on. I believe you told me when we talked that he's 51 years old now, I believe is what I
in
remember.
September.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So obviously, um, he's still functioning at the level that he can, and he's still moving forward. So that's got to give you a great deal of satisfaction. But I know it was a very hard journey. But like we say, everything, as warriors say, everything comes with both challenge and support. I'm sure you got support, and now you want to be that support for the people who have those challenges. So that's a beautiful thing. I really want to let's do this because I know you're just dying to talk about, the things that you've been doing and you are doing to make to support those that are caring for parents, children with special needs, even their friends and neighbors, I guess, going through the recovery from even this last year. So let's take another quick break. We'll come back. We'll hear a little more Ricky Jean Wright, and we'll be right back with Warrior versus Zombie and Cheryl Ginnings. All right, we're back. And again, what an amazing story, Cheryl. I'm just still um, kind of blown away with the challenges. And I actually have gone through a lot of the things in terms of not necessarily with my own family, but I have friends that have gone through some of those things with children with special needs back when I was having my own children or even before. And I know what that environment was like. And so now that we're to today, and you talked a little bit about your dream and your why, those things. But tell me about, you know, and I can obviously see some of the value because you've had the experience. You walked a mile already in those, or many miles in those shoes, and you can help somebody maybe be a Sherpa and help somebody up the same mountain or around the same mountain or whatever. But tell me a little bit about where you are, where you're going. If anything were possible, what kind of impact would you have?
Well, one of the things I want to back up just about three years ago, I got a call from a station in New York, and they said, "We'd like for you to be a host on a radio program." And I was like, "Wow, that's great." And they said, "Well, it's because the number of children with autism," and I was just kind of in awe. Why did they call me? And they said, "Well, you do know that we can read anything that you write on social media, don't you, Cheryl?" And I said, "Yes, but I hadn't thought about it." But anyway, I agreed, and it was one of the best things I've ever done. Every week on Monday night, I did a live radio program where they called me and they, did all of the background work. And I had some amazing people. I kept meeting people from around the world that I would interview who were involved in caregiving, either of their parents, their children, their spouses, or even dealing with critical medical issues that could have taken their life, but maybe didn't. My focus was to find out what gave them the strength to go through what they did and what lessons they learned that we need to pass on. And that was my big focus. So then I decided, man, I'm learning so much from all these people. I wrote a book called It Takes Courage to Be a Caregiver, because in those people, I kept seeing so much courage, and they don't see themselves as being courageous. It's kind of like saying in World War II, the men that came back were heroes, and they go, no, 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 it's the ones that passed away. We don't see ourselves in that position. And that is part of the problem, I think, why we haven't gotten more support. We don't know how to be vocal about what our needs are, if it's on a personal level or if it's on a level like with the government explaining, why do you need a wheelchair? Why did I have to fight 3 years with Medicare to get my son a wheelchair? And they would end up saying, well, are you wanting one that's an electric? And I go, no, his body has deformed from him not walking and being in a bed or a chair all the time. He cannot sit straight, and his body has to be formed to that chair. So a lot of things that we need are just not, nobody understands really unless you've been in that position. Now, one of the people that I interviewed was one of the most fascinating men, and he was a lawyer who was helping families that had special needs children, and he kept seeing the same problems a lot. He became a lobbyist, but he started this group called caregiving.org or cerebralpalsy.org, I'm sorry. And when I interviewed him, he said, we have found that it takes between $3 and $5 million to raise a child from birth to death that has special needs with cerebral palsy. And I thought, no wonder we were always broke. His care cost more than we made. It always did, even if it was just a few hours. Anyway, to perpetuate what I'm doing, what I'm seeing is that this is getting to be a bigger problem because baby boomers are retiring, and I'm one of them. And we've already jumped from 43 million people at home caregiving to over 53 in 5 years, 53 million. And that's people at home without pay. So the caregiver support groups are very needed, and so are resources. We just need to provide more, but also education. And I've even talked to my own doctor about when a baby is born in our local hospital and they go in the NICU and they have any kind of special needs, just call me. I will come and visit with them and give them support, because the parents usually grieve in different ways. They don't understand what they're dealing with. They don't understand each other, because one will say, I've got to go back to work, even if the other one has to quit a job. But they see each other as if they don't care as much as they do. And that's part of the problem. They don't know how to talk about it. And then you've got everybody running to you with what they think is going to work or why this happened. And I've told people, it doesn't matter why things happen. It is a bitter person. You're angry, you're mad at God, you're mad at everybody else. Or you become a better person. You're stronger. You're able to see what needs to be done. And you get your strength from the trials that you go through. And so that's really where I'm at. And my biggest problem, I think, is just getting the word out that these people need so much support.
That is a big challenge. And again, I admire and appreciate the message and your ministry and your focus there, because it is probably one of the areas that it's the most, I think we're beginning to get some visibility in that, and that's a good news thing. What other than you being there personally, and you've written some books that I think have become a resource, and being guests on shows like this and others, what other impact, what is, if anything were possible, when at the end of the day, when you leave the planet, Cheryl, what would the impact look like that you leave a legacy of?
When I was much younger, I thought, we need to deal with businesses so they understand why a lot of the things that they didn't understand with the disability acts, of widening doorways, providing some ramps or whatever, to help them understand why those are needed. And now we've gotten part of that done. And why parents need the support, because they'll end up, a lot of times they're so overwhelmed, they'll give away their baby to somebody else, or they have grandparents that raise them. And those children that end up in any kind of like community home or a place like that, if you can even get that kind of support, you can't get it most of the time anymore. But if you get it, they hardly ever are visited. And their needs are great. But here with this mask business, they can't even tell you they can't breathe. It just irritates me that they think that they're going to protect people when they're hurting them. These kids can't tell you. My son couldn't tell you if it didn't work. And he was assaulted in one of the group homes. And when he was assaulted, man, I got on a mission. I found every place in Texas, because that's where we have to keep him in the Texas system to keep any benefits. But when I found that, I loaded the car and said, I don't know when I'll be back. I am going to interview everybody to find a better place. And I interviewed 14 companies in a week. And then I found a family that was recommended. And I thought, oh, I don't want him in a home. I don't know what they're doing. But when we interviewed this couple, they were so sweet. They had very little to live on, but they had a home of love. And they said, if we take your son, we want him the rest of his life. And I went, whoa, wait, I'm not giving away my son. And they said, but if he's part of our family, you can't just come and take him out in a couple of years and say, we're moving him. They have become our family.
Amen.
They help us raise him because we can't lift him. My body broke down a few years ago and I could no longer lift him. And he requires total care. And then they are like our kids, their kids are like our grandkids. And we've made sure that our other two girls and their families have all gotten to be together so they get to know each other, because they will be there for Blake until he's gone.
Wow.
And that's amazing. In fact, let me tell you, they are actually building a house right now, and they've just moved up from the little bit of care for him. And they actually do catering now, but they're building a home that's handicapped accessible just because they have Blake. Everything about the house is going to be handicapped accessible. If I could raise money for them, I would do that. I don't know how to do some of these things, but they've given their lives to take care of him, and they do that for the homeless. They cook and go feed the homeless. Even during the pandemic, they would do that every week. And they didn't have any income except for helping us with Blake. Wow. So I see a lot of really good people, and I would love to share other people's stories, but I'd love the attention of being able to get Congress to say, we need to give support to the people who literally cannot provide for themselves instead of people who just don't want to work. If I could do that, that would just be the answer to a big problem.
Well, I'm going to take that moment because you kind of paused there with the connection and just say that worthy cause. The answer, we can get a lot of support from government and the system, if you will. But it's, to me, the most powerful thing you just said is that life is a team sport. God brings people into our lives that we need, that maybe know more of what we need than we do for ourselves. And that's the story. That's what I heard out of what you said. Let's do this. We need to get into the land the plane segment, or the fourth segment. And so we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. And when we come back in this last segment, those in the audience, if you have a question, you can type it in the chat. I'm going to, in the interest of time, I might ask those questions, but in lieu of that, Cheryl, what I would like you to do is, if there were one or two things, three, I mean, you pick, but a finite number of things that you would want the listener to take away from this podcast, or the person viewing it live in the Hive or whatever, what would that be? And then we also want to know how that we stay in touch with you, because I'm certain that this will get shared with people who are caregivers or need the support that I think you can offer. And I want to make sure that happens. So with that, take a quick break. We'll be right back with Cheryl Ginnings in the final segment of Warrior versus Zombie. All right, we are back, and man, what an emotional and quite a journey. Very inspiring, by the way. I know it's when you emerge, everything. We're either going into a valley, we're coming out of a valley, and I'm just always fascinated to hear the journey of the warriors, and the way that you continue to focus forward. And I love the impact you want to have, not only through what your son continues to need, and your admiration for those that actually, in addition to yourself, that were giving care to him. But if there were any, as I said before, if there were anything that the listener would take away, if there were any couple of things that we should take away from this talk or this time, what would that be?
Okay, I'll just go ahead and tell you that the programs that I had that were on the live program are now on pray.com, and that came about by an invitation to have a channel on there. And if anybody's interested in hearing more, we've experienced a lot of very difficult things in helping care for three parents, one of them 17 years, then helping with my parents after my dad had a stroke as a result of a heart surgery, and the care that it took to take care of him. And a lot of things are putting you in a situation where you're thinking, I'm actually in God's waiting room. I'm waiting for an answer. I don't know what I'm going to do next, or I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm in this waiting room. Well, you've got a lot of company. And that's where I try to help people understand you're not alone, because that's one of the major problems people have when they're caregivers. People isolate them, or they're no longer invited out, or they just can't leave. They've got too much to deal with. So I really appreciate being on that program. I also am out there on Spreaker, iHeart, iTunes, and the program is out there called Courage to Overcome, with the number 2. And sadly, last year I gave up my website with that name, and it became a really bad site. So I hope people don't blame me for that. But they thought I had a stroke, and I thought, oh, I've got to lighten my load a little, to not have it. But the things that I would like for people to do is connect with us on Be Connected, because that's where most of these people are. If they have a reason to need something, I've already gotten to write an article for Dr. Hipsy. Is that how you pronounce her name? And it was in her magazine. And when I talked to her, she was dealing with her mother in the hospital. So I it off. So if you're dealing with caring for a parent, just connect with me, tell me, and I'll connect you to some of the articles that are out there and let you know. I'll try to see if I can support you. And for those that are caregivers, let me just say there's 5 things I want them to know. First of all, B stands for be bold. Learn to speak up and say what you need. And that's tough, but speak up. L is for listening. I want you to listen to what is said, but also live one day at a time. The Bible tells us that, but also Dale Carnegie said, live in airtight or daytight compartments. A is for your attitude. That may be the only thing you can change, but make sure your attitude is what it should be. K is for knowledge. You have to find the resources or the information about what you're dealing with yourself. Doctors are not going to tell you anything you don't ask questions about most of the time. And E is for encouragement. You learn to encourage others, and in turn, they will encourage you. And that spells my son's name, Blake. So if you can remember Blake, you will remember some tips that will help you live one day at a time, but also approach it with gratefulness that maybe you don't have as hard a time as somebody else does. And I can always look around and see people who have it harder than I do. And I appreciate you, David, for what you're doing and trying to encourage warriors to keep going, because everybody, even warriors, get tired. You think, what's the use? We just got to keep going. We're the ones that are out there fighting with those battles that look really tough, and others want to give up. We're not going to do it. We're going to keep going. If anybody wants to connect with me on Be Connected, that'd probably be the easiest thing.
All right, and that's one of the reasons why we're live in the Hive. It's an extremely powerful group. It's growing every day, and I got to tell you, it's kind of emotional. I mean, I think about some of the challenges that we have, and just to hear, and your son Blake will be that will be an impact, knowing, and all those things are important. And frankly, we are right now the sandwich generation. So
right.
the thing is, I have 5 children. I have almost 6 grandchildren, growing, and then I have a 90-year-old mom, and so we're in the middle of this. And if you're not caregiving, you will be. If
That's
you're
right.
and so I so admire you and the effort that you're putting in. And I know it sometimes feels thankless, and you say, "What's the point?" I know I question sometimes my own, you know, why God has me doing what He does. But you know what? I just want you to know, with the E in your encouragement, that today you were an encouragement. When we talked on Monday, you were an encouragement. You made me realize that when I'm
Oh,
wrestling with things, um, that I think are tough, there's always, number one, there's other people that I need to talk to. I'm not by myself. And number two is there's other people that are have had a harder road. And so, and that is what continuing to be a warrior and what life is about. So thank you. Thank you, Cheryl.
well, thank you. You've been an encouragement to me too, just to know somebody else is out there trying to find the good things that we focus on. Man, we can do so much more together than we can alone. And this is a platform that people can really help each other.
Amen. All right. Well, we've completed another episode of Warrior versus Zombie. If you wanna find us, for sure, if you're in the Be Connected community, we're live in the Hive every week. I'll be bringing a warrior every week, and also this podcast will be shared on every podcasting platform: Apple Podcasts, Google, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, as she mentioned, actually is a distribution channel that I use, and so you'll find us, and we'll be here. So if you're a warrior and you're looking to get your message out, or if you need some encouragement, I'd encourage you to reach out to Cheryl, and hope to see you or hear you next, and for you to be part of our audience at our next episode of Warrior versus Zombie. And we'll hear the final segment of It's Not the Getting There with Ricky Jean Wright. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you.